Welcome to the Black Writer Studio, a podcast presented by the Hurston Wright Foundation and hosted by Dr. Khadijah Ali Coleman. The Black Writer Studio is dedicated to showcasing Black writers who are transforming the world today with their literary pen and creating a legacy for the culture. Poet and literary scholar Evie Shockley thinks, creates, and writes with her eye on a Black feminist horizon. Her books of poetry include Suddenly We, Semiautomatic, and The New Black. Her work has twice garnered the Hurston Wright Legacy Award and has been named a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. Her honors include the Poetry Society of America's Shelley Memorial Award, the Lannan Literary Award for Poetry, the Holmes National Poetry Prize, and the Stephen Henderson Award. Her joys include participating in poetry communities such as Cave Canem and collaborating with like-minded artists working in various media. Shockley is the Zora Neale Hurston Distinguished Professor of English at Rutgers University.
Something is always burning. Passion, pride, envy, desire, the internal organs going chokingly up in smoke, as something outside the body exerts a pull that drags us like a match across sandpaper. Something is always burning. London, Paris, Detroit, LA, the neighborhoods no one outside seems to see until they're backlit by flames. Then the outsiders, peering through dense, acrid, black and orange-rimmed fumes, mistake their dark reflections for savages altogether alien. How hot are the London riots for West End pearls? How hot in Tottenham? Black bloods, highly combustible, under conditions of sufficient pressure, measured roughly in years plus lead divided by pounds. But if one bead of cream rolls down one precious neck, heads will roll in Brixton. The science of sociology, the Mark Duggan principle of cause and effect.
Hello.
Hello.
Welcome, Evie Shockley. I'm so excited. I'm trying to stop the smiles. That poem, so for our listeners, just so that they know that I begged and pleaded and requested that poem to open today's episode. So there's so much in that poem, and I think that that poem represents for me my relationship with your work. And what I've noticed in your work that you often um, refer to fire, which I find extremely interesting as a writer myself because I make reference a lot to water. But I also find that that poem, even though it's from an earlier collection, and I definitely want us to talk today about your most recent collection, Miss National Book a long listed author. But I think that when we are, thinking about where we are right now in time, where we are witnessing genocidal behavior, whether it's Palestine, Congo, Sudan, and then bringing it home to even, here, how we are still wrapped up in conditions where it's ongoing
Yes.
fire. I just wanted to start with that. I think it's such a beautiful piece, and thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing.
Oh, thank you. It's my pleasure. We write to 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 put words to these tragedies and dissect these politics and try to sort of give people who want to work against the fire
Mm-hmm.
some fuel of a different sort.
Yeah, I I have you in front of me. There's so much that I wish that I could talk to you about, for my own personal experiences, just with this picture that you painted in that poem. But this isn't about me. What I do want to, um, Terrence Hayes, he wrote about your work. Evie Shockley seems to step to us wearing an alluring silk gown and steel-toe gorilla boots. She possesses that rare combination of grace and subversiveness, which I thought was what a brilliant description of your work. But I did want to know from you how does your writing inform your relationship with the world? This silk and gorilla toed boot, steel-toed gorilla boots. What imagery? But for you, how do you receive that?
Oh, I mean, first of all, just grateful to Terrence and to the various poets who have done me the honor of putting words on the backs of my books. You are walking this path in company, but when people want to make a record of that companionship, it's really an honor. I very much vibe with what Terrence said in that quote, or at least the spirit of it, that this idea that there is beauty perhaps in these works, but also something hard that we have to confront,
Mhm.
something that might be coming for you, depending on who you are, reader.
That's
but
right.
but might also just be, something that you can grab and use to make your way safely through this world. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I think I resonate very, very much with the way that quote describes my books. There's
Yeah,
great attention to beauty, what language can do to feed us, but a lot of the subjects are hard.
yeah, yeah. And it 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 is not often that with the topics that you address in your work, where folks with your level of mainstream readership still take on the responsibility of bringing certain topics to fore and speaking to certain um, and, and I don't even have to say certain, speaking to this relationship that Black people in particular have with this world that we exist in. And so I ask you, you know, as a writer who has um, shown up in so many different spaces, how does your writing um, inform you about your relationship with the world, or is it vice versa? I don't think we think how our writing articulates what we know about ourselves, but a lot of
Right.
times as writers, we realize that folks are articulate or perceiving our work to be a certain thing. And have you been surprised with this relationship that your writing has kind of created for you in relationship with the world?
I see what your question is. Yes. I mean, I'm surprised by so many aspects of the way my work is received. I mean, that it is received is always it always feels like a gift in the first place because, I mean, there are the Emily Dickinsons of the world who don't really let the work out. But then there are others who are writing their hearts out, um, and the work circulates in a relatively close circle around them. So I was just saying to another poet the other day, the moment when you start to hear back about your poetry from people you don't know,
Hmm.
or who are not even like a friend of a friend, then
Yes.
like that just feels like a surprise and a gift. So that's just a
Yeah.
start. But there's something about what you're saying about who's willing to go with me to the places that I want to go in my work. Um, and I think I in some ways cut myself the hardest path, because I gravitate towards um, what you might just call critique. I gravitate towards naming the issues, the problems, and maybe more towards possibility, pointing to the things that I think um, we can use to work against or solve those problems. Not so much poetry of answers, but poetry that likes to hold out the possibility. If we know about this, if we talk about this, if we can see ourselves collectively in this, that there's some stuff to be gained from that. And at the same time, as I reach for those harder subjects and try to get us to confront what's difficult, I also gravitate towards writing that sometimes is fairly straightforward and sometimes is really odd or what we sometimes call experimental. And so, in a lot of ways, I'm surprised to have anything like what you could call a mainstream audience, whether it's mainstream poetics, mainstream
Was
subject
that
matter.
shocking when I said that? When I said that, even referred to you, I noticed a shift in the energy. Was that how did that make you feel when I even used that word in relation to your work?
I will answer that question with this observation. And this is a chance for me to love on Hurston Wright. So Hurston Wright, the Legacy Award that I won for The New Black was the first anything I won in poetry. Wow. It was my second book. I did not win contests to get my books published. They were, I think, just great fortune that these books came into the world, because most first books and chapbooks and everything win contests to even see print. So I hadn't won anything for poetry before that. And so that was just such a gift and a particular honor to be recognized by Hurston Wright, an award that is for Black writers, right? Um, my subsequent book also won an award from Hurston Wright for, this in this context of Black writing. And now suddenly we has won an award that's for Black writers, not Hurston Wright, but still, that is like, I could not be happier. I could not be happier because it just means that people understand that these books are for them. Black people understand that these books are for them. That said, I even though I don't sort of necessarily have awards that represent this wider audience, I know I have readers, and I know the books circulate.
Yeah.
And that is also what this work is meant to do. It's meant to center Blackness and invite people to come and sit with us. So
It sounds like you're aware that it still is a limited amount of Black writers who are writing poetry, who are having their work read and seen on a level of where it's seen outside of the Black community or even seen within the Black community. Honestly, it sounds just from your response, I'm hearing that it's such humbleness, and it also is just an awareness of this landscape that we exist within as writers. Um, and that leads me to um, just ask you, what has this journey been like for you as a writer? And when I was listening to your answer before in terms of what you hope for with your poetry, I didn't want to interrupt. And I loved where you were going, but I couldn't disassociate from this awareness that you speak a lot as if as an educator, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of writers that I talk to who, even if they are in a position where they're a faculty somewhere, they don't necessarily speak of their work as having this responsibility or this goal of informing or engaging folks in dialogue. And so in your response, it was very obvious. You just was talking, you sounded like a teacher, you sounded like an educator, you sounded like someone, even with your art, that you are hoping that critical thinking is happening. And so I have this question on how you are existing as this creative who also is the Zora Neale Hurston Distinguished Professor of English at Rutgers University, this beautifully long title, but this responsibility of really inspiring and working with writers or with those who are engaged in literary work of some kind, whether it's critique, whether it's themselves writers. How do you establish um, this role as an artist, but also as an educator? How does that show up for you?
I guess I shouldn't be surprised to hear you say that. That does check. But um, and I think you're talking to me at a point in my career where I used to talk about wearing both hats at the same time. And now I think it's just one hat. It's just this is who I am. And I've been really lucky to have spent the bulk of my career at institutions, whether my, graduate school years at Duke University or my current job where I've been since 2005 at Rutgers University in New Brunswick. The people who I've been surrounded by have understood that my passions are creating poetry and teaching African American literature. And so I get to write the poetry and go around the country or beyond and share that work. And my department understands that and values that. But I teach mostly literature. I teach graduate students, hopefully the future professors, or just cultural ambassadors from African American literature to the public and to the next generations. And I teach every year a Black poetry course to undergraduates that is probably my favorite part of my job at Rutgers, just that class every year. Um, so how that shows up in many ways is that I write out of a deep sense of tradition because I've studied the tradition. And when I am teaching creative writing, which I do occasionally, um, I want them to read. I don't know if I'm a beloved teacher of creative writing because what I want them to do is read.
Right, right, right.
Because that's what made me the poet I am.
Exactly.
I don't have an MFA. So it's not that workshopping is not valuable or that community is not a huge part of my life and being as a poet, but community led me to the books
Yes.
that feed my writing.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
I interviewed another writer who is teaching and shared the same. They don't necessarily teach writing, but what they're teaching, it was really self-taught, being self-taught, and spoke to the importance of reading. And
Yeah.
it's interesting you say you believe you follow in a tradition. I would love to hear you talk more about that. And I don't know how often you're asked, but I would love to know the who are some of those writers that have really informed you when you talk about this tradition that you're following. Who are those literary icons or role models for you when you think of who inspired you to write as you do?
Oh, wow. I mean, whew, you have a semester. I always name Gwendolyn Brooks because she was really the first poet I studied as an undergrad. I was in school in Chicago, or I was at Northwestern, so I wasn't really in Chicago. Let the record be, correct. But but I absorbed so much Chicago-ness while I was there, and I lived in Chicago then later. Gwendolyn Brooks is, the model that she set for being a poet of place. I mean, like you have to
Yes.
say Chicago when you say Gwendolyn Brooks.
Yes.
And it was a particular neighborhood or area of
Mm,
Chicago where
mm,
she lived her life, did her work. It didn't stop her from being interested in students, young poets throughout the state. She was
mm,
known for her generosity.
mhm,
She funded out of her pocket writing awards for kids from like elementary school through high school
mm,
every year while she was a poet laureate of Illinois.
mhm,
Um, but she always kept the South Side at the center, and she was not a lot younger than I am now at the moment when she sort of upended her career in order to um, align herself with the energy, the political energy of the Black Arts Movement,
mhm,
what she found so valuable for her own sense of self and
mhm,
what she saw the potential for it to do culturally and politically.
mhm,
That along with her example along with Sonia Sanchez, who is the
mhm,
same. She has this beautiful long career making these poems that aren't easy, that they don't just sort of just spill out
mhm,
into language that we've already heard a million times, right?
mhm,
They work language. They push, they give us images that we don't know exactly how to translate
mhm,
into plain English, um, but that love of craft and beauty is devoted to sort of bringing people in and and their work is continually renewed because they stay in touch with what younger people are thinking and what the political sort of temperature is in
mhm.
among people. So those are two. I also really love. I mean, if I start, Harriet Mullen is the only living poet that I tend um, to mention a lot as an important influence on my work. Well, that's probably not true. Ed Robertson is another. And the last person I'll say, because I have to say this is the only one of these people that I really studied with, which is Lucille Clifton. She was a huge influence on me. And so I could talk about this
What a
for
blessing that
forever.
you worked with Lucille Clifton.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. And it's not lost on me that all of the examples are like you, educators and poets who were intensely ingrained in community work as well.
Mhm.
And, you know, I'm also hearing when you are mentioning Gwendolyn Brooks and Sonia Sanchez, the Black arts movement in general, what that was as a cultural imprint
Mhm.
on what followed. I'm
Mhm.
always taken with the story of Gwendolyn Brooks also as, a lot of times when she's mentioned, it's always as this Pulitzer Prize, for the awards. But um, I love the story and hearing the story how the book that she won that for, they weren't even going to publish it, and how she was a writer who I would she would self-publish in a heartbeat. And
Mhm.
that part of her story is rarely spoken of when we are within a literary landscape that makes self-publishing really an illegitimate route for writers.
Mhm.
But those that you even mentioned, Gwendolyn Brooks, Sonia Sanchez, the Black arts movement, that really that ownership and the ways that those works came to be really revolved around um, taking ownership of not only the words, but the press and the ways that the work is distributed. So that leads me to my question on your next foray into this literary. You're so busy as an academic, as a writer and artist, someone who many speak, as you lovingly spoke of, Lucille Clifton and the work of Gwendolyn Brooks. Many speak of you as well and the ways that you work with young writers. Is there anything on the horizon for you in terms of your work as an artist, as an educator, or a new role within this literary landscape?
Wow. I mean, that's a great question. And I think it, um, it's a cue for me to do some reflection because, right now I'm kind of at a point, just in my career, you could say, and maybe even in my life where, um, I'm working as fast as I can and can't
Yeah.
keep up with the commitments that I have. But um, I I'm going to try to do some resetting in the sabbatical I have coming up, and that's a moment to really sort of think about what ways I can pay it forward. I have talked with some of my contemporaries on this journey, and we just keep going, oh my God, how are we now at the place in our careers where, Rita Dove or Yusuf Komunyakaa were when we were baby poets?
Yeah.
And what does that mean in terms of what we should be doing and um, how we can do for them what the poets before us did to make spaces for us, to open doors, to drop a little nugget here and there of what you need to know,
Mm-hmm.
look out for, or to try to aim for. So that's really something I think I'll take with me into this sabbatical, Khadijah. I really appreciate the provocation.
Oh, well, I hope that I can't wait to find out what it is because I think everyone needs to hear someone just say it. You don't assume, but you are an icon and you are a blessing to so many. And so I want to know what is next. And also as you even speak of these commitments, and I'm with you in this whirlwind of responsibility. And so many people talk about the labor of Black women, but
Mm,
sometimes, I'm in a place where I'm realizing that maybe the message is for a shift to happen, and
mhm.
that, to recognize and to step into this new phase of who we are. I just turned 50 in December, and I'm having all kinds of epiphanies as, a lot of times, a shift is necessary, and a shift doesn't necessarily mean a lessening or, you know, I heard Hanif, I always mispronounce his last name.
Mhm.
But he's promoting a new book, and I went to go see his reading last night, and Jason Reynolds asked him the question about ascendancy, because that's an inherent theme in his a book that's a theme that's inherent in his book. It runs throughout his book, and he said that ascendancy doesn't necessarily mean um, going up, but it can also mean the width of it. And I
Yeah,
and I almost cried listening to that, because that's aligned with this idea of this new phase or this transition. The width of how we show up, and there's so much width and breadth to your presence in our literary landscape. And so I would just love to know where that expands into. And so I want us to close out. Before I ask where you would like for us to get your books, we didn't talk anything about Suddenly We, just a little bit, a little smidge, but I loved the conversation that we've had. But I pulled
okay.
this quote: language is both tool and terrain in this racialized loss of innocence. This is what you said in an interview about your book, Suddenly We. And I would love to just close out with you just explaining and talking a little bit about language is both tool and terrain in this racialized loss of innocence.
Wow. I mean, I think of Suddenly We as a book that leans into the ways, as my work has always done, and I think the ways that language carries the histories, does so much of the work of separating, oppressing, um, structuring society in these ways that we know are anti-Black, are capitalist, are homophobic, so on and so forth. The but what we also can take from poetry, poetry written in the tradition of an Audre Lorde or
Mm.
something like that, is the possibility of language as a tool that we can then use to disassemble those structures and
Mm.
create other structures that will shelter us better and that were made for us, with us in mind, right?
Yes.
So I think that a lot of what Suddenly We is trying to do is actually um, point to the necessity of us working together in that kind of a project,
Mm.
because language is social.
Hmm.
It doesn't matter what the word means to me unless I can write a poem that you will read and we can come to a new shared definition of how this word can work in the world or what kind of world it could build. So that's just like, I know I've been very long-winded, so I wanted to try to give
Mm-mm.
a shorter answer.
Not at all. That's what I'm asking, and that's a great explanation, because that is what language is, and to then reflect on that, that is ultimately what poetry is, and how we react to it is how we are interpreting this language. So that's beautiful. And that, what a wonderful segue into my next question, my last question. Where would you like folks to get this most recent book from you, Suddenly We?
Thank you. So I always like to shout out the one independent, I think maybe the one bookstore in my town. I live in Jersey City, and that's Word Books. So Word Books in Jersey City for folks who are nearby. But I also am in love with Harriet's Bookshop in Philadelphia. I did a book event there with a friend who was writing about the Sisterhood, that organization of writers that
Oh,
included Alice
Courtney
Walker.
Thorson?
Yeah, Courtney Thorson.
Okay, yes, yes, yeah, okay.
Yes, we did a launch for her book there, and that bookshop is it is delightful and a
Yes.
gift to Philadelphia and to
Yeah. And the owner is just fantastic. Jeanette is amazing. So yeah, that what a wonderful shout out. Any place else?
I mean, your local independent bookstore or bookshop.com.org.
I think it's .org, yes.
Yeah, which can put you in touch with any of the bookstores that we've named. I mean, I know you always shout out Politics and Prose, which of course,
Right. Mahogany Books, Sankofa.
yeah,
Yeah, those are our
yes, and
friends. Yeah.
Copa. Uh-huh. So yeah, all the good ones, all the good ones.
Oh, fantastic. Well, this has been such a gift to me. My listeners. But oh my goodness, I'm so happy to be in conversation with you. I did want to end that my daughter believes that I know everybody, and you know how our children often think that we know everybody. Well, she
Yeah.
is a senior at the University of San Francisco, and she recently was assigned, I think it was last semester, work by you, and she said, "Mommy, do you know Evie Shockley?" I said, "Not yet." But I hope to soon because I'm a fan. And so she
Oh,
wanted me to just say hello from San Francisco to you. And I just want to
thank
thank you again
you.
for being a part of the Black Writers Studio. Thank you.
Oh, it's been such a pleasure. Such a pleasure. First conversation of many, Khadijah.
Oh, I hope so. Oh.
Thank you.